All right, stragglers will have to miss the intro slides that they've never seen before. So to start off then, a big thank you to our sponsors out there in the exhibition hall. You've heard this a bunch of times. It's not just them coming to the show, buying a spot to show you their stuff. It's also about us working with them, asking them all kinds of questions, getting software, getting access to things, getting access to their engineers so that we can have a better understanding of what's going on, get you better demos and things like that in our presentations. So we'll kick off with an introduction and we'll talk about, hey, why do we want to do this? Very first thing we want to do is the thing that's hard for everybody right now is making friends. Then we'll talk about teams, networks, and operational things. And I apologize in advance, the network things section will probably hurt your brain. So about me, my name is Torrren Manson. I'm with Cloud Revolution. I've been doing Teams voice since forever. I like the nasty, big, complex projects. The simple ones are boring. And I am the former Household Renegade Roundup champion on Mario Kart and on our Nintendo Switch. Both of my kids can now beat me. Okay, so why are we doing this? If you attended any of the earlier sessions, any other presentations, or have any knowledge of Kari's Law and RAY BAUMs Act, it's basically why we're doing this. It's why we're here. And so there's kind of 4 pillars of what we need to set up for emergency calling. The first is we want to allow the caller to dial just 911. 3 digits, no line codes, no XR9 up front, no fancy rigmarole. The second thing we need to do, though, is let them know that they have indeed placed an emergency call. So on that display in Teams land, we're going to get a big red warning circle. It's going to have some information on it. It's going to have their address in case they're not in a spot that they're used to, or adrenaline's kicked in and they're like, what's the address of the office again? It's going to have their callback number because the emergency call taker is probably going to ask them for that. We're going to take that same information and we're going to send that to somebody else at the facility who can reasonably help them out. It's kind of a loose definition of what that is. That's going to vary depending on your organization and who you have there that could help out. Reception can come and open a door to let the ambulance crew in. They can reserve the elevator. The first aid crew can respond, whatever your scenario is. And then lastly, RAY BAUMs Act, we've got dispatchable location, which roughly translates into where do you want the emergency services actually to go? 123 Main Street isn't good enough. If this hotel was an office building where we're all wandering around with our corporate laptops on Wi-Fi, we'd need to break this up. We couldn't just provide the street address of this office building to emergency services. If I need somebody in here, I need a reasonable shot of telling them, hey, bottom floor, conference rooms in the northwest corner type of thing. So these 4 pillars are law in the United States. In Canada, they are strongly encouraged. And the reason they're only strongly encouraged is we actually don't have a government body in charge of telephone systems. So there are regulations in place for the carriers, for them to begin accepting everything, running emergency call taking. Nothing to force anybody to do anything on their phone system, though. Everywhere else, though, this stuff kind of makes sense. If I'm in an office building this big and I'm working for an organization, I want to know that they're doing these things to look after employees. So exceptions, don't exceptions. Apologize to anyone who is not a fan of Kung Fu Panda with noodles, don't noodles. So there are limited exceptions to those 4 pillars, those regulations, and really that boils down to the gear can't do it. Okay, if you're on a basic common area phone that can't display, hey, you've called an emergency number, here's your address, here's your callback number, you don't have to do it. If you are in a small co-working facility, there's 4 of you in an office, back to back on desks, probably not a lot of point in notifying your coworker who's having the heart attack that you've just called 911 for your coworker who's having the heart attack, right? So you'd want to notify somebody else who can help out, not at your facility. HR is a good one. There are no exceptions for this is hard. Yes, this is hard. Microsoft is aware. Jamie Stark is here from Microsoft. I have regular counseling sessions with him about what my customers put me through as I deploy this stuff. There's no exceptions for we don't want to, I don't want to, and definitely not anything for, oh, it's a new deployment, so we got to get like 6 months before we have to do anything, right? No, there's nothing like that in the legislation. What is in the legislation, though, are some accountability clauses that if you are the implementer or the operator of the phone system, you are legally responsible for making those 4 pillars happen. So making friends. Why do we need to make friends, and who do we need to make friends with? The very first person or people that we need to make friends with are executive sponsors. This is probably their baby anyway, but the rest of this list might be a little bit hesitant in working with us. So we might need to go talk to that executive sponsor and go, hey, network guy doesn't want to do the thing. Can you make him go do the thing, please? We're going to talk to the network guy because they're going to have the most work to do. IT security is going to be all over this just because they always are. IT operations, you're going to have change control processes, especially on the network. You replace an access point, you need to pass that information on to the Teams guys who can put that back into Teams for location determination. Your building and your organization security, they're good people to know and to notify about emergency calls. If you've got a security department, they're your first people that you should be notifying. Facilities, I'll show some good examples of signage later on. You want to talk to facilities because you want to understand what the signage is in the building that's going to direct those first responders to the location information that you've sent to them. If you're a municipality and you send to the emergency call takers that you need assistance in council chambers, they come in the front door to City Hall and there's no sign that says council chambers this way, it just says second floor west. You probably should have said second floor west in your location information. You could say second floor west council chambers or council chambers second west, something like that. But you want to be in some harmony. HR wants to know just because, hey, something's happened with one of the employees, 911's been called. Legal, I'm not a lawyer. I won't answer legal questions. I'll tell you to go talk to your legal counsel. When you come to me and say, oh, there's got to be an exception for this, I will tell you to go take that to your legal counsel and ask them, because I'm the implementer of this. I'm legally responsible for making those things happen. I want a paper trail that says, I sent you to your lawyer. I didn't tell you. Yeah, good, you don't have to do it. Safety, first aid teams, kind of an obvious one there. And union and workers' council. Some of this is just technology change. Some of this is also in some countries, you've got issues around your location information. You've got it in your Teams client. You're going to be sending that along to emergency services or to other people in your organization. What are the rules and the regulations around that? So they're going to want to be involved in that. And legal will be involved in that as well. In Canada, the specific legislation around that is if you dial 911, you've given explicit consent for your information to be shared, for help to come, for them to provide first aid to you, etc. All right, so we've made friends, and now let's do some Teams things. So the Teams clients need to be able to figure out where they are. Your location information isn't based on you, it's based on your clients. I'm signed in right now on at least 3 different devices. They're all, okay, 2 of them are in the same spot because they're right here beside each other. And the 3rd is not. So we don't want me and that uncertainty of which Torrren we're reporting a location on. We want the device to figure out where it is. There's 2 ways we can do that. We can use GPS, public Wi-Fi signals that have been mapped. That only comes into play if your device has those, and if those public Wi-Fi symbols have been mapped to a reasonable degree in your neighborhood. In mine, they haven't. It puts me on a similarly named road 2 blocks away. So if I'm on fire, they'll be able to find me, follow the smoke. If there's any other emergency, I'm out of luck. So we come down now to network infrastructure. What is our device connecting to, and how can that help us figure out where we are? We need to tie those things together to figure out our location, and hey, it's Teams. What would Teams be without policies to assign? So in Teams, there's a location section. The top and the bottom here, emergency addresses, networks, and locations. They're kind of like the top bun and the bottom bun on your hamburger. And the network topology in the middle, that's your patty. So we need the network infrastructure information for our location in those top 2, and network information in a different database in that middle one, in the patty, for where we're assigning our policies. Yes?
It seems like the network and location just the same but in the emergency addresses section. When would you ever actually add information to network location instead of emergency addresses?
So the best time for that is not really adding in my thought process. If I add, I'm going to go through the location if I'm doing onesie twosies, but more for looking at things and reporting. Okay. I'll look at my IP addresses, 192.168.1.2.3.4. Oh, 7's missing kind of thing, right? Microsoft Certified Technical Debt Collector, expert level. This shows up a couple of places in here. There's some technical debt in Teams. Some of the stuff comes way, Jamie's laughing. Jamie's laughing hard. We've got things in Teams that are in Teams because that's the way it was in Link, and the stack just didn't get rewritten from the ground up, but what we do has changed. So one of the things is we've got 2 different databases to put our information into. The reason we have those 2 different databases is different groups building different things, but also the emergency addresses with the red arrows. Once upon a time, that could be an external server. That can't in Teams, but we've still got this legacy of those 2 databases. The effort and the consideration that would be required to redo this, to not have those 2 different databases, is probably pretty big. All right, so if we click on network topology, we've got another handy-dandy little icon. The trophy has shown up in the bottom corner. That's showing something that's a best practice. In this case, I've got a description that says lab for voice ... So it's a meaningful description about what that network is for in this network site. We've got a couple of other tabs there, trusted IPs and roaming policies. Roaming policies really don't have anything to do with emergency calling or location determination. Those are for a site that's over a low bandwidth link. You can assign policies to that site to restrict a client's bandwidth usage. Trusted IPs really aren't yet a site-related thing. Trusted IPs are used by teams to figure out if you are internal to the organization or external to the organization. This is your public IP address. So if you hit Teams from a known public IP address, you're internal. If you hit Teams from an IP address that it doesn't know, you're external. Doesn't matter at this point where they are. There's no kind of policy assignment based on those. It's the simple test of are you internal or not. So if we click into that a little bit deeper, we'll look at our 240 lab network here. We've got add network region up at the top. Sorry, Jamie. This is another thing from the Link and the Skype for Business days. You would take your sites, you would put them in regions, and you could do some cool stuff. If your WAN was down, you could dial out over the PSTN to the other ones, and there was call admission control for your bandwidth restrictions. It was really cool. It's still kind of hanging around in Teams, doesn't currently do anything. Will it do something in the future? I don't know. But it's there for now. It's handy if you're a larger organization for organizing your sites. If you're a smaller organization with 2 offices in Washington State, I wouldn't worry about it. This next section, the top left-hand corner, location-based routing. If you're in India, that's important to you. If you're not, that is not important to you. We've got on the top right corner our network roaming policy that's applied to the site. So are we restricting the bandwidth there? Then we've got our emergency calling policy and our emergency call routing policy. And we'll dive into those in more depth later. And we've got our subnets assigned to this site. And a little note there to remind me about subnet masks in a couple of minutes. We've got a subnet mask here for our sites. So how do policies get assigned? Teams divides your network topology. Teams doesn't break. Teams doesn't break anything. Breaks it into those network regions and the network sites. Network sites have those policies associated to them. We just saw a list of 3 of them, mostly for emergency calling, but also that bandwidth thing got thrown in there. You can call your sites and your regions whatever you want. There's no particular logic to whether you do North America or you do Americas or whatever you have. If you've got a lot of offices in the US, you might have the US as a region to help organize your things for you. Each site, though, has 1 or more subnets associated to it. Just subnets, none of the other stuff that we're going to talk about later. A policy for a network site is handed down to a Teams client that's on a subnet in that site. We've got 3 ways of assigning policies in Teams. We can assign them to a network, and that will take precedence over the other 2, which are to a user, and then the global policy, which is the default catch-all. All 3 of these are important in emergency calling in different scenarios. So here we've got an example. We've got 2 different regions, 3 different sites within those regions. We've got our laptop at the bottom on the 192.168.3 network. That matches up with Seattle. The Seattle policy gets assigned for emergency call routing, emergency calling policy. So what makes up a network site? We talked about those subnets. It's whatever subnets you assign to it. There's no technical rules for it, but there's a lot of logical and why would you rules to keep you in compliance with those 4 pillars that we've got to do. Some organizations have subnets that will span multiple buildings. Anyone here from university? Yes. For wired networks, this is why you need to make friends, and every once in a while you have to invoke the executive sponsors. The network guys need to resubnet. There's really no way around this. You need to do policies based on buildings to meet the notification requirements. If your subnet spans multiple buildings, you can't meet that requirement. For Wi-Fi networks, you should resubnet. It's a much more sane approach. Some Wi-Fi controllers, though, will only let you have this giant /22 or /21 for your entire organization. Also looking at you, university people. There's some workarounds we can do there. And recall that there are exemptions if your technology can't do it. So if your Wi-Fi controller system can't actually break those things down, you do the best that you can in that system, and you make a note for your next Wi-Fi refresh that you need to get away from that. We're haunted. And again, there's no, that's a lot of work, I'd rather not, or maybe later. So, yes?
So the purpose of the policy assignment by network site is to be able to have a unique notifications experience when folks move around between sites, right? You use the example of buildings. You run into that, like on a campus with multiple buildings, there's a security desk at each building that needs to have somebody that needs to be aware.
Yes.
Building.
Yeah.
Okay. Is that the standard, or is that atypical, or I was imagining like campus-wide?
It's common. I kind of called out universities earlier. I'm working with one now. They've got 4 buildings that have the same subnets and the same address.
Okay.
Which is
different security desks at each building.
or different people that you would want to notify. Some of the buildings are related to healthcare, providing healthcare. So if there's something going on there, you're going to want to notify the people there. One of your dental patients has a heart attack, you hopefully are following your legislation and have someone there trained in first aid to deal with that, get the AED right away. You don't want to notify some central body who's going to take a bit to get there. Yes. We'll go here first.
You know, the use case I ran into with having different subnets per building wasn't so much because we wanted to more so classify the location correctly for each building. Always made that's why we set up. There were some cases where we used the same notification method for multiple buildings, but they were correctly classified by having subnets. That's how we address it.
Yeah, just the requirements intertwine, right? Like if your users don't move
Yeah.
around, then no big deal, because then it's user assigned policy that can drive your notification experience. But if it's your users move around and they're moving around to sites, where in those sites you want to have a notification experience, right?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure.
And then there's that, you know, maybe the building doesn't have anybody who can reasonably help, but there's central security for that chunk of the campus right next door. So does that meet the legislative requirements? They can take action, they can get over there pretty quick, they're the security for that, but they're in a different building. That to me is one of those things where I say, hey, go talk to your council.
Sure.
Yes.
I have this exact scenario. I have to be able to send that 911 call there by walking across the street. So that's where I'm assuming that you're probably submitting.
Yeah, I'm going to keep going here.
Yes.
I think I've got a lot of slides that will cover probably most of the questions around this. So on the left, I've got an example of a good network site. We've got a building that we've broken up into 4 different locations. First floor, east-west type of thing. Second floor, east-west. We've got 3 subnets for that building. We can locate someone within that building for the purposes of sending them the emergency notification. The next one over is that example of the larger spanning one, and we run into those issues. Who are we notifying to help out and take that action?
Are there cons to having multiple subnets?
Not really. If you're a larger organization and you've got multiple subnets, you're probably scripting it all anyway. It's microseconds of extra time to have 3 versus 1. So policies and locations, we've got our policy assigned for our user and our location now. So now we need to tie the user's location to the network infrastructure. So this needs to be granular enough to meet that definition of dispatchable location. So where exactly do we want the emergency services to go to? So we have something called emergency locations. We use our network infrastructure to break our building up. The first thing we want to try doing this with is with IP subnets, because we've got them already for our policies. They're already happily in our spreadsheet, or they're in that database. We can export them and import them. There are other options if subnets won't work for that purpose. So are we internal? We talked about the trusted IP a little bit earlier when we looked at this policy. Okay, I just won't touch the podium, I think. Network range, we've got our trophy beside there. We've got a /29 with this IP address. We think it's a good idea to put the entire subnet in. Again, Teams is using this to figure out at this point, are you internal, are you external? If you put this down to the specific IP with a /32, your network gets very busy, you run out of ports, you've got to add another IP to that NAT pool. You've now got a change issue that's breaking. Users are going to have that IP that's not up here. So just go ahead and assign the entire range. And give it a good name that's meaningful. Teams doesn't care about this, but you care about this. The network guys care about this, and you've got to talk together. So this should be named the same so that you're not talking about IP addresses. So let's take those two building examples and look at them from the perspective of emergency locations. These are both bad examples. The first one has that giant /22 now. We can't break up our building into those 8 different colored blocks with that /22. It's for the entire building. So that was an example of a good network site, but this is a bad example of an emergency location. This hurts. So I'll dive into that one in some more detail in a bit with a better diagram to look at to help explain that. So subnets that span multiple buildings are problematic. If we are wired, we can resubnet. That's my preferred thing. That's going to take a while. Our other options are to look at the switch chassis ID, which requires LLDP, not CDP in Cisco land. And we can also get down to the port name. And these are in a hierarchy of precedence. The most granular location will take precedence. So if I define a port on a switch that's on the 5th floor that serves the 6th floor, because we've all done that, right? We've out of ports on this floor, we'll throw a wire down to the lower closet, plug in, hey, we're good. Well, now we've got to do a bunch of work for emergency locations to say, hey, the person who's plugged into port 24 over here, they're actually on the 6th floor, not on the 5th floor. Everything else for that floor, though, we could use the subnet to do that. So you don't have to do every single port just because you've kind of cracked Pandora's box open and started using a port. If you're on Wi-Fi, we can use something called the BSSID, which is a per SSID per radio MAC address. And yeah, Wi-Fi goes between floors. Clients will hang on to one access point even if you've roamed and there's another one that's closer. That's just the nature of the technology. There's no really good way around that. So I talked about these first points already. The last one is really the relevant one, the best practice. Your subnet should always be configured in Teams, even if you've got that giant /22 that you can only point at 123 Main Street. Because now if one of my access points gets replaced and doesn't get updated in Teams, I'm still sending at least the building address to emergency services rather than nothing. So let's have a look at this diagram again. I'll nicely color code it. This is our building with all of the gory details from the perspective of a network site. We've got our IP addresses here that appear in the building. We've got the 192.168s on the 4th floor, and then the rest of the building uses the 10 dot address. So we've got one network site that's got these 4 emergency response locations indicated by the light. But really, we've got 9 emergency response locations because we've got that default, that catch-all that's for the entire building in case these more detailed discriminators don't work. And yes, we had fun with the MAC addresses. So this is those things put together. This will be in the slide deck if you want to stare at it and have a look at it or see me after. And that is why the network people don't like us, if you were in Seth's presentation yesterday. So 2 entirely different databases, network topology for policies based purely on subnets. Emergency locations are the subnet or the switch port, or the subnet and the Wi-Fi BSSID, and granular. So what does TAC look like in these 2 spots? Here is our emergency addresses. We've got our location up top with a really good hierarchical name. I forgot to put a trophy beside that, I think. We've got our 10.55 address, and then we've got our emergency location added in the table there as well. If we hop down to network and locations, we see that same IP subnet, that same location. So this is those two different views. It's exactly the same information, it's just two different views into the same thing. So we have confirmation, they're the same. So back to emergency addresses for a bit. We've got those good site names. I did give myself the trophy as a best practice. If you're in a larger organization and you don't have a good policy for your site names, you will not be happy with yourself. There are some renaming capabilities coming up. It used to be in PowerShell, basically, you would have to create a new one and then move all of your objects over. It was not fun. And then over on the other side, we've got our organization's name. When you build a civic address in TAC, the default that it sticks in there is your short tenant name from 12 years ago when your tenant was created, and it's probably not at all applicable to what you actually operate at or have displayed on signs. So change that. You want your organization name that gets reported, because all of this gets sent to emergency services. You want it to be reflective of what's on the sign out front. If you're Starbucks, put Starbucks. If you are Safeway, put Safeway rather than 12584 Bahamas Ltd or whatever their legal name is, that's on their tenant. So what's in an emergency address? We've got down below here, we've got some location IDs. Everything in the emergency address section has location IDs. So our main address has one, and then each of our places, those 8 cubes that we broke our tower into, they all have their own location ID as well. That's what we hook the network information to. We don't hook that information to 5th floor west because you can rename that. We hook it to a unique identifier. This section here I find confusing because you've got these things with the green arrows are your network information and your phone numbers that apply to this location ID up top. And then you've got this critter over on the left here, places. That's not your network information over here. That's those 8 sublocations in your tower. So what are places? Places are those 8 locations. That's what we break our building up into. The entire building is not a place. Just those subdivisions are the place. When we're talking about locations and location IDs, each of those 8 is a location and gets a location ID. The entire thing is also a location and gets a location ID. It's a special case. There's a flag is default true false. It'll be marked as true because it applies to the entire site, actually to the civic address object. So in TAC, there's our location IDs, there's our places, and we're on the places tab here, not any of the network information tab, so the table shows our places. So the same information down there in the table is places and locations. The top one is just a location, it's not the place. All right, anybody see a brewing best practice sort of half implemented on this? We've got the same site from our network topology and our emergency addresses. And they have not quite the same name, but very, very similar names. You don't have to do this, but if you have different naming standards for these different things, you will hate yourself as you're trying to do your maintenance and operational tasks on these. There are character limitations between the two, both in terms of the length and what characters you can put in. You can't actually put dashes in the network topology, so we flip those to underscores. Jamie's scowling and taking notes. You know, I wouldn't fret over that. If you're running a script or anything like that, you can swap those out easy enough. So now the network parts. We've got our subnets, our Wi-Fi access points. What do all of these things look like? So What do our subnets look like here? Hey, this is pretty simple, right? We've got an IP version. It does IPv6. I saw my first in the wild IPv6 user in a meeting the other day. We've got our subnet assigned, and we've got a description, legacy VLAN for the entire facility, and the emergency location below that subnet applies to. That's going to apply to the entire building, not to one of those individual places. This slide from a while ago, I said, hey, remind me about subnet masks. There's no subnet mask here. So why not? Technically, we don't need it. The client has an IP and a subnet mask. We can tell if it's in that subnet just by doing subnet math. You don't need masks for both of your examples. So the subnet mask is sort of kind of redundant for the network site, or is it? One of the fun things about that is you can supernet on your network topology sites. So if you're 10.10.10, 10.10.11, 10.10.12, you don't have to individually enter all of those. You could say, hey, I'm 10.10. Whatever /22 or 23. Please don't supernet. The biggest reason behind this, you can technically do it. The biggest reason not to is you've now broken your own ability to stare and compare your IP addresses between your sites and find the missing ones. You need both of these to trigger and implement for emergency calling to work. So don't make things harder on yourself. Have your one spreadsheet to work with, have your subnet mask in there. Your script, when it goes against that CSV file, just doesn't use it in that section. Couple of exceptions about keep those two databases the same as far as subnet goes. You do want your VPN and legacy VDI subnets in your network topology because they need policies just like everybody else does. If you're on VDI or you're on a VPN, we still need to say to teams, if you're on direct routing, how to route your emergency calls. We still need to notify someone, that's in the legislation, but you're not in a building. So we can't notify someone at that building. We have to notify someone globally, HR, security desk. You do not want those subnets, though, in your emergency locations, because then your client thinks, oh, that subnet belongs in 123 Main Street, but that's not where you are. So don't put those addresses in there. And there's a little superscript one about the legacy VDI subnets. The legacy VDI, the old stuff, not the new 2.0 stuff. If you're on the old stuff, please upgrade already. You will save yourself so much anguish. The new stuff works great. So access points, what do they look like? We've got a field up here in the top right where we can enter it. We get a couple of examples with X's and dashes. They're dashes, not colons. The network world uses colons. Teams uses dashes. Jamie's busy scribbling this down. So you've got a Control H, search and replace in your CSV file before you do any uploads or scripts. We've got our description for the access point. Get this from the access point network team, 4th West outside room 101. Where is it? Teams doesn't care about this. This is for your own sanity of where is this access point. So the BSSID, again, it's like a MAC address and it's a per SSID per radio. So we've got, I had a slide that didn't come up there. I was gonna chat about a certain network vendor. Oh, I did have it up there. So everybody except Meraki, if you look at that red box that's there, there's an asterisk for the last hex digit. You can put a wildcard in there. Your BSS IDs will all be the same for the first characters, and they'll increment on the last one. That's why you get this number of, hey, 16 SSIDs per radio on your access point. That's so you can form your BSS IDs. It's that one character, that's the wildcard. If you've got an access point that can do 32, it's 2 of these. You can't wildcard Meraki because they do a different format and it's some character in the middle that changes, and people who think Meraki is great start hating them when they get to this, because if you've got 16 SSIDs, we need all 16 BSS IDs in that CSV file, and it gets really, really big. All right, switches and switch ports. What do those look like? Not stunningly different. We've got our port name and our chassis ID. I've got a number for the port name here. That's something that HP would do on their older ProCurve switches. Cisco will have the GEI/0/3 type of thing going on. Your chassis ID is usually a MAC address. It doesn't have to be. Some switches do really weird things and they'll give you a serial number or the actual name that you've given the switch. And again, we've got a good description going on. So to figure these things out, not knowing what is my switch vendor doing, what is my chassis ID, is it that number that's on the bottom of the switch on a sticker, but my switch is in a rack, so how do I get it? I'm in the console, I don't understand which one it is. Wireshark is your friend. Turn it on, filter for LLDP, and you'll see the packets go through. You open that up and you'll see your port and you'll see your chassis ID. It's far and away the easiest way to do it. There's no wildcard for chassis IDs. There's not multiple per. If you have stacked switches, each switch in the stack will most likely have its own chassis ID. They don't kind of merge those together within the stack that I've seen anyway. Yes? Okay.
You need to match that.
Yes, whatever you see in LLDP is what you need to match. So if you've got a stack, you might need to sit there and pull your cable and look at what each of those different switches is spitting out just to be sure. Again, we talked earlier, it's fun, it's a lot of work. Yeah, it is.
The problem is
Yes.
you have to
Yeah.
or
Operations is no more fun than the initial setup. Okay, so our policies. We've got a calling policy and a call routing policy. And they can apply globally, that's our default, or to a site in this case. So the emergency call routing policy is about our dialing and our routing of our emergency call, mostly for direct routing, but you can run into some weird things when you start doing shared calling where you need some of this policy to help you out. So this is what a call routing policy looks like. We've got a name, we've got a really lame description. My naming standard is really good. How much more in my description do I need? This one here, dynamic emergency calling policy. Turn it on everywhere. If it's not on, things don't trigger for emergency calling. Having it on doesn't break anything. Our emergency numbers, we've got 911 and 933. When you are setting this stuff up, in most circumstances, with calling plan and operator connect, you can always dial 933 as a test. With your direct routing operator, hopefully whoever you selected for emergency services or your carrier has selected also offers 933 as a test. From the team's perspective, 933 and 911 are identical. There's no difference between them. There's an exception to that on the next slide. So as you're doing your testing and you've got notifications and whatnot, those are going to trigger. So when you're testing with 933, make sure the people in your test group know before you test. After you've tested, give them the all clear to let them know that you're done. Our dial mask here with the purple arrow and the trophy is what our user is actually going to dial. So yeah, Kari's law says they have to be able to dial 911. We've got that there. People have muscle memory or they're not sure if they have to dial a 9 to get out. Let's throw 9911 in there too. It's 5 extra keystrokes. Super easy, we just do it. If you're an international organization, why don't we also throw in 112 and 999? If those users are in North America and they happen to just forget and dial their own emergency number, that's going to send out, in all 4 of those cases, 911, all is well. So our emergency calling policy is about our notifications and our remote workers. There's our name and our wonderful description. We've got this thing called external location lookup mode. that triggers the user's client to either talk to location services on their device and say, hey, where am I? And prompt the user, hey, enter your address, confirm your address, edit your address. And you can put a disclaimer in there. This is an HR legal type of thing. What are you going to put in there? And our emergency numbers. So this is something new. We've got different notification policies possible for different emergency numbers. This could be used during your testing processes to have 933 not send those alerts, the same as 911. This is really helpful for other countries that have multiple emergency numbers. They don't have that one central number. So what do those notification things look like? We get to put our dial string up front. Zoom in a bit here. We've got a grayed out field about a number to dial for emergency calls. We've got a notification mode, a spot for a group, and we've got the notification group. That gets a trophy because this is a group name and not a list of users. You can put either or, you can mix them here, doesn't matter. If you put users in here, it's now Teams admins who need to administer this. If you put a group here, it's now group administrators who can deal with this. The name of this should be absolutely crystal clear that it's for your emergency policy notifications. Spell out the word emergency and have 911 in it so that those group administrators don't go, huh, what's this for? And nobody's in it, and go ahead and delete them. That also gives you the opportunity to have a script that runs against your group names and looks for the word emergency and checks periodically about how many users are in them and are they active users. Got to notify someone. If all the users in your notification group have departed your organization, you're not notifying anybody. So our notification modes, there's a none. We can't do that. There's a send notification only, conferenced in but are muted, and conferenced in and are unmuted. That bottom one is a bad description. It's conferenced in and can unmute. So that gets the frown not because of the kind of misphrasing. I know an unreasonable number of emergency services people, including call takers, and I asked them about this. I said, hey, do you want me to set this up and have other people join the call? They reminded me that they probably know 17 untraceable ways of killing me and hiding the body, should I ever do that. The very last thing they want while they're working through their flow tree, trying to roll the trucks for the correct emergency service, is somebody jumping on there and going, hey Dave, what's going on, man? So let them listen. Don't conference them in so that they can unmute. Other than you've got like your own professional security, not the rent-a-cop type of security guards, but the real professional security department who will know how to use that appropriately. These three things here are just one group. So you cannot send notifications to a broader group and then conference in a smaller group. So be careful here selecting these conference policies. You probably want reception to know that there's an emergency call been placed. Probably don't want the 20-year-old college intern being conferenced live into an emergency call. That's not what they signed up for. If this doesn't do enough for you, there's a new API coming out. Teams will send all of the same information that's getting sent to the emergency services that's being sent to these people on these notifications to your platform of choice. One of the sponsors here, Entergrade, has a product that they're developing that will do these alerts, including not being part of Teams. So if your security guards don't have Teams around, they can have a client on their PC that can notify. With their platform and Teams, you can break up and get that granularity. Yes?
So you said Integrate is the company name or the product name?
Entergrade is the company name.
Integrate is the company name.
Yep.
What's the product called?
I don't remember.
Okay.
Yeah.
That intrigued me that there was already somebody that had a polished product that already out there. I heard about this product. It was mostly exposing APIs that allow us to create something else, but there's something already pre-baked out there.
Yeah, and it's simple enough, it's there, it's powerful enough. I expect all kinds of people to be integrating into that. I would be surprised if someone at Single Wire isn't busy pounding against that API trying to figure out how to do stuff with it. All right, oh, I want to go back here. We've got that grayed out field up there that you can't fill in unless you select one of those notification modes where you're calling your group as well. This is one phone number that you can add in here, just one. Has to be, doesn't have to be an E164 format, but that's the best way to make sure that it routes. It has to be in your format to be able to route. So +1 425 8675 309. If you call that, by the way, it plays Jenny. I want to find that person in Seattle and buy them a beer because it's awesome. So it's that one single number. It can be internal or external. So it can be that mobile phone for security guards, for example. They cannot unmute. They will always be muted. They're not a Teams client. There's no unmute. So global policies. In our global policy, we want to turn this external location lookup mode on. Our global policy is our catch-all. If you're at home, you're probably going to get the global policy because our other policies we applied to sites, but you're not in one of the sites, so you're not going to get one of those policies. So for users who are not assigned to a policy, if you're a really strange organization and you don't have remote workers, everyone's in the office, always, 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 you should still do this. Because if you mess up or the network guys mess up and swap gear and don't tell you, this is your catch-all that's still going to have them enter their address. You still want that backup to trigger. If you don't put this in there, they'll just happily sing along, not have an address there. Yes?
Is there a way to prevent calling in Teams that you did not go through the process of getting your address?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
That would be cool though, because if I'm working at Starbucks, just don't make me. I'm not going to call from Teams. So the global ECP, we want it. So there's an exception here. If you don't want all of your users, you're a global organization and you don't want the guys in the UK to be prompted for their location because you're just deploying this for the US, don't use global, build a US catch-all policy and assign it to all of your US users. That triggers this. So when they're outside of your organization, the user policy will take precedence. When they are in your organization, in one of your sites, the site-based policy triggers. So operational things, we're almost done here. You want to test lots. Very first step you want to do, you want to check that address that's underneath your dial pad. You want to make sure it's correct, but you also want to make sure it's complete. Does it have your suite number? Are you 6th floor west or are you just 123 Main Street? If it should have the 6th floor west and it doesn't, then you're missing something in your network information and it's catching the default of that entire building address. Yes? So they're all different. Mobile is not. Mobile doesn't show any of this stuff. It just hides it all. The really great default for mobile, though, is it uses its location services, which is another great one. Teams is going to ask your users, hey, Teams wants to access your location. Allow, yes, no. And most users that I know would probably say no unless you've prompted them or trained them to say yes. There's a change for that coming that breaks it down and says, hey, do you want to allow this for emergency services only? Do you want to allow this for logging and IT purposes and all the other stuff that's going on? So that gets more clear. Yes. Soon? So your next step then is to call 933, listen for the bot that's going to read your address back. Same thing. Does it have my correct address? Does it include that suite number or that place description? If it does not, but that is appearing underneath my dial pad, Teams is sending what's under your dial pad. So this is the far side service is ignoring, most likely, your Teams information and doing an anti-alley dip into its database and treating you as a static caller. There's a couple of ways to solve that depending on who your provider is, and I've got a slide that touches on that coming up. Your last one, though, is you want to find the non-emergency number for your PSAP. You want to call them up, say, hey, we're deploying a new phone system. We need to test 911. We've already done all of our internal tests. When may we do this? They will say, hey, no, go ahead. They'll say, call back tomorrow. We're really busy, whatever's going on. Go ahead and call. When you do call, tell them immediately that this is a scheduled test call from ABC organization so that they know, okay, whew, I don't have to do things. They'll probably look up with their supervisor and go, the supervisor's going to do this back to them kind of thing. Client logs, if you're trying to debug, contain all of this wonderful stuff in them. Yesterday, Jamie told us about some upcoming reports that will help us out by putting the information into Teams Admin Center about what the client is actually seeing, so we can match those up and go, oh, the client's seeing that chassis ID, but I thought it was on this chassis ID. Oops, I got it wrong type of thing. The other, rinse, repeat regularly. You can't just test this once and then assume that it's always going to work. So change control. The Teams team dealing with all of this thing needs to be hooked into your change control. You guys need to know that network is spinning up some new subnets, they're resubnetting, deploying new gear, doing a gear refresh, all their add move changes for those failed access points. This is a good spot to be hooked into that. I talked earlier about building signage and wayfinding signage. This is, Jamie will recognize this. This is from the Microsoft campus. I took a bunch of pictures there because there's just phenomenal mapping. We've got, you're in zone 1, 2, 3. Here's a map right inside the front door that shows you your zones. Here's your room showing you all the different zones, all the different rooms, all your different directions on where to go. You can throw any emergency person in there and they would be able to find you much more quickly than if they just had to come in the front door and wander around. Some people will make an assumption that, hey, it's my fire hall right over there that's going to respond. Bad assumption. If they're busy, you're going to get the trucks from the next hall over and they're probably not going to know your building. Finally, read the funny manual. I was talking about that collision between the static address and the dynamic address. This is from Intrado. They're telling you right in here the exception. They don't call out Teams. It's just listed as Skype for Business. Same stuff. They're calling out here. There is no address in ERS for you. You're taking the dynamic information from Teams. Reading the manual is always a best practice. So other oddball stuff, the SBA, my next presentation in an hour, does not do dynamic 911. There's no access to any of that stuff that's in Teams. It's just a regular, boring, static phone call out. Make sure your SBC has all the proper dial patterns to make that call go out, that you didn't just look for 10 digits only type of thing. Shared calling has weird, special things that are needed. And if you're doing this site-based location policy, which you are, and you have direct routing, and then someone gets the bright idea of let's do shared calling with calling plans, things will break. Your emergency calls will go out that direct routing provider. That's probably suboptimal. At the very least, that provider is going to start getting angry with you about you sending the wrong calls out to them. And that is all. Thank you.